Texas voters will soon decide which Democrat faces Ted Cruz in November. We're going in depth with the top two candidates.
I'm proud that I've been the most bipartisan member of the Texas delegation. And I want to be a senator now for this state that's given me so much.
Their views on the issues and how they hope to make a difference representing you.
We've got to change this world. We've got to do something better for my kids and everyone's kids out there.
Plus, we hear from the man they're trying to defeat.
Nobody can watch the chaos at our southern border and defend it, which is why the Democrat strategy is pretend it doesn't exist.
Senator Ted Cruz gives insight into his ideas on immigration and the border on this special edition of State of Texas.
Produced from the Capitol in Austin and airing statewide, this is the award-winning State of Texas.
Hello and thank you for joining us. I'm Josh Hinkle. Early voting starts Tuesday for the Texas primary. One of the closest watched races on the ballot is the Democratic campaign for U.S. Senate. We had planned to host a televised debate in this race. Our parent company Nexstar outlined specific criteria for which candidates could be on the debate stage. Among the requirements, candidates had to raise at least $50,000 in campaign contributions. Also, they had to receive at least 5% support in a major poll of Texas voters. Of the 9 candidates on the ballot, 2 qualified for the debate stage, Dallas Congressman Colin Allred and San Antonio State Senator Roland Gutierrez. The televised debate has not happened, so before early voting begins, we decided to take a different approach on behalf of Texas voters. I spoke to both Allred and Gutierrez in separate interviews in the past few days. We asked them similar questions. We're going to play their answers back to back to give you a chance to compare the candidates, starting with their thoughts on immigration policy. You've talked about the need for comprehensive immigration reform, and so have the other candidates in this race. But for you, what does comprehensive immigration reform mean? What policies does that entail?
Yeah, well, I think it has to be bipartisan, and I'm signed on to and worked with Veronica Escobar on a bipartisan bill called the Dignity Act that I think is a really good way forward for us to show that we can do a number of things at once. Number one, we have to secure the border. That's something that every country has to do, and this bill would allow us to do that. But we also need to better match our immigration system to meet the needs of our economy. And that's something I hear from employers all the time. And we want to be a country that can still attract and retain the top talent from around the world. And with our broken system right now, it's making it harder for us to do that. And then, of course, we need to have a pathway out of the shadows for folks who've been here who are undocumented to find a way forward for them, and particularly to protect our dreamers. To me, those are the kind of 3 pillars of what we know a bipartisan immigration reform is going to look like. We haven't done comprehensive reform since the Reagan era. It's time for us to get that done now.
You've talked about the need for comprehensive immigration reform, and so have other candidates in this race. But for you, what does comprehensive immigration reform really mean? What policies does that entail?
Yeah, if you go to Roland for Texas, you'll see a 5-point plan. So first off, I'm the son of immigrants. I'm an immigration lawyer, and I represent about 400 miles of this U.S. border, including Eagle Pass. And we've seen how Greg Abbott's movie theater set has come ebbed and flowed as far as migration. The fact is we've had migration patterns for 100 years and beyond in this state. We've got to fix our broken H-2A and H-2B visa system, incorporate a program like mine, a country of origin program that says that you apply for your job in El Salvador or Nicaragua or wherever. You go to the U.S. consulate, you go to a Department of Labor kiosk, you get background checked, and in 90 days, your new employer brings you to the United States, as is current law under H-2As and H-2Bs. These asylum seekers are not asylum seekers, they're job seekers. And every economist will tell you we need 30 million jobs to fill for jobs that Americans don't want to do. We are an aging country. We need to look at this in a real way and look at the other elements of my comprehensive immigration reform plan, and you'll see that it secures the border, fixes our economy, and safeguards Social Security.
Yeah, let's drill down just a little bit there on that point. The push for immigration reform is a long process, obviously. For now, what immediate steps do you believe should be taken to alleviate concerns about people crossing the border?
Well, I'll tell you what we shouldn't be doing. We shouldn't be signing resolutions like my opponent has done with crackpot Republicans, calling Joe Biden an open borders president, because that doesn't do anything. It doesn't do anything, doesn't fix anything, doesn't acknowledge anything. That entire resolution was chock full of lies. We've got to do real things. And if so far as getting people away from the border, right now there was 4 people that crossed an Eagle Pass last week. a country of origin program solves those issues. If you look at the fifth point in my plan, we spend money on the DEA to go after cartels in Mexico. We did this in the 80s in Colombia, and we were successful at taking down the most dangerous cartels in the world. We can do that again in a real way, but we've got to expand visas. We've got to look at how we train the best and brightest in the world and then send them back home.
Your opponent, Roland Gutierrez, has criticized you for joining Republicans to condemn President Biden's handling of the border. How do you respond to that criticism?
Well, I think that in that vote, I was saying that I can't stand for the status quo, that I don't think it's acceptable. And when we have a record number of crossings, as we did last December, we know that something has to change. And I think that for us, as Texans, we have to acknowledge that there is a crisis, and now we have to respond to it. We don't have to respond by being inhumane or by being brutal, but we do have to do something. And that's where my biggest criticism is of Senator Cruz, which is that he wants to talk about the problem at the border, but he doesn't want to actually solve it. When he had a chance recently here in the United States Senate to have a bipartisan deal to try and address what was happening at the border, he didn't want to vote for it, not because of the policy, but because he wants to have the political issue to run on in November. I'll never put politics over what's best for our state when I'm in the Senate.
Coming up, the deadly conflict highlights a divide for the candidates. We'll hear their differing approaches to the Middle East. But first, fear and frustration after more high-profile incidents of gun violence, how the top candidates for Senate have their sights set on solutions. And later, we hear from the man the Democrats want to beat, one-on-one with Senator Ted Cruz, ahead on State of Texas.